Right then, so we're back, and as you can see, we've got the two fuselage halves, and we've got the main deck encompassing the rotor hub assembly, and we're going to get some paint laid down to detail this up. So, three paints we're using today is Tamiya X1 matte. Well, it's gloss black, but I've put some Tamiya X21, which is flat base, so that'll make that more of a satin black. It's just that I've got lots of gloss and very little matte, so I'll use this for a base coat. And then after doing a bit of research, it would appear most of the internal panels have a version of X4 yellow green as the primer coat inside, and then we've got a mix of Helo drab for some of the rotor head and matte black. And for painting, brush painting matte black, which is what I'll be doing, I like using the Revell Aqua Color. It's a really nice paint. Good coverage with a brush, but also thins really well with Tamiya X20A. They seem to go well together, certainly this color, and it means it just self levels and you never know it's been brush painted. So that's the three colors we'll be using, plus the undercoat and primer. So let's get some paint in the airbrush and lay some color down. Now I've pre-stirred and shaked and thinned this, so I'm just going to pour it straight into the colour cup. I did a bit of that before I got on camera. I'm using my venerable, get some length on my cable here, caught up under the desk. So I'm using my venerable De Vilbis dagger. That's got a 3.5 needle in, so it'll chop paint out all day, but it'll be fine for what we're needing. So what I'll also do is just, there we go, so just get underneath, and you're not going to see much of this, but you're going to see some of it, because that opening at the top for the rotor head to clear is certainly large. So just want to paint down to here. You're not going to see anything back here, but I think we'll just give that a quick coat. Give the inside of the cockpit walls a wee dusting, just so we don't happen to miss any grey plastic. There we go. So there's one side done, second side done. So this being a 3.5 needle, it lays down a decent layer of paint reasonably quickly. You don't need a tremendous amount of air pressure to do it either. And there we go. That's the easy bits done. Move them out of the way. Now all I've done here is a bit of sprue up underneath, super glue, and that gives us something to hold it, so it keeps our hands away from the rotor head. So what we want to be doing is just rotating it Anyway, light coats down, do not flood it, else you'll lose the detail. You need to come in from all angles as well, so looking above, below. The beauty with having this bit of sprue in there is you can easily rotate it. It's like we'll turn it on a little axle, so you know you're going to get paint in everywhere. So just check all the bits and pieces. And then I managed to break it off, never mind. That's alright. Hair in it. A couple of hairs in it. Happy days. Right, so there we go. Don't worry about the smudges down here. No one's going to see that tucked away at the back. What you can do is you can thin down the mix with some thinners, just as you're going to clean the airbrush out. And then if you spray that over there quite liberally and let it settle, it'll help dissolve. Oh dear, oh, made a mess of that, haven't we? See, everyone has bad days. Everyone has bad days. Clear all that out. A bit too heavy on the thinners. But we'll get this rescued. You can actually see that that paint is starting to come together and self-level. So we just need to leave that, and it'll be as if it never existed. What we can do though is go back in with some of the original colour, unthinned, and give it a little dust over the top. Wee dust over the top. There we go. And that has pretty much vanished. There is still a hair in the paint, much to my annoyance, but can pull that out. Right, excellent. So I'm going to let this dry, clean out the airbrush, and then we'll get some of the yellow green in for the interior colour. Right, so airbrush clean, paint dry, and we're going to begin the painting process. I've already had a quick spray over the damaged area just to see how it's going to be hidden away, but it seems to be hiding alright. So we can just start laying in. doesn't matter what sort of finish you get here, to be fair, you're not really going to see it. So it's a fine place to practice your mottling technique, so you can get a bit of variation. In real life, this area will be covered in all sorts of gearbox and transmission and avionics. So I was looking at the reference photos for this, and it's actually not so easy to find any good reference photos on the internet of this area, but it would appear that this particular, obviously the deck's going to be this green colour, yellowy green chromate colour, but the hub assembly is looking to be black. So I'm just going to spray roughly around the bottom, and then with the brush we're going to touch back in, paint over where we've got a bit of overspray. Obviously want to try and avoid as much as possible the overspray. These helicopters in their working life, they did get quite grimy. Well, they do get quite grimy, so it doesn't matter if you've got a mottled finish, because it'll just add to that bit of realism. There we go, that's good enough. So if you care for the airbrush, you can avoid most of the overspray. We've just got a little bit on the lower parts here. That's going to be easily touched in with the brush paint. So we'll then go in and do the fuselage halves, and again, light coat over this roof. There we go. Touching any areas you're not just happy with. Splendid. Right, so that's the base colours sorted. We'll clean the airbrush out, and then we can get going with the brush painting. Alright, so we are back, and this is our nicely painted rig. So what I've done off camera, because I thought it would be easier trying to do it on camera, is I just went over with, like I said, this Revell Acrycolor matte black on tweezers to do pointies. So we've painted these actuator legs here, and we've painted the main support legs and the lower, I'm assuming that's gearbox transfer box mount, in matte black. And what I've done is I've left the rest of it in the semi-gloss black, just to add a bit of colour variation. Now, if you can see, if I can get up close, you can see on these support legs there are a number of raised ribs around them. Now, actually, on reference photos, they look like they're some sort of fastening clips, but they're certainly yellow in colour. So we might, well, you could think to dry brush them. Realistically, I'll show you this anyway. If we pop this in its housing there, and we pop the other half on. So there you go. So you are going to see down in there, especially. Actually, we need to get the cockpit in because that's going to close in a lot of the light. I can squeeze that in. Should have thought about that before I went this far ahead. Right. There you go. Let's get the cockpit in, and then we'll get a realistic view of how much we're actually going to see. Never easy doing it on camera. There we go. Right, so you're not going to see a whole heap in there. It's quite dark and dingy. There is a little bit of colour to be seen, but not much at all. So what we can do to liven it up a little bit and add a bit more interest into this is a simple dry brush. If you want to super detail it, crack on. Filly boots. I'm not overly fussed. I don't think you're really going to see much of this. I'm not really fussed about painting these in the yellow colour they are, but I think if we just give this an overall dry brush, it'll give the impression, or highlight the detail a little bit more and make it a little more interesting. So to do that, I'm going to use one of my more sort of softer brushes. I'm going to use this one because it's going to have to reach into a few parts and get the paint where we need it. And I'm going to use a light grey colour. So we've got XF 66 light grey. So we don't want, there's not a lot in here, but it's enough for what we need to do. So this is quite a thin paint because it's already been pre-thinned many times before. So we just want to load the brush up and a scrap piece of paper towel. You want to paint away all angles, get the bulk of the paint out of the brush, and then rub it again until you're just getting the merest of paint. Right, so your brush is basically dry now, and then you want to just gently rub over the parts so it catches the high points. Try and come in for all the different angles. The beauty of this being a nice soft bristle brush, the longer bristles is that you can reach in all the parts. Don't worry if you think, oh crikey, we've done too much, because there's another thing we can do that will help to just tone it down a bit. So just brush away until you're happy. should remember sometimes less is more. But in this circumstances, we've got plenty of room to maneuver because, like I said, it's going to be so dark. Down in the recess, you're not going to see an awful lot of this. So make sure it's nice and even on all the parts. You may see you've got one part standing out versus the rest of them. There we go. I think we're just about there. Get the underside as well. And catch the edges. There we go. And the beauty with a soft bristle brush like this is basically because you've got fragile parts here, you're not going to actually break them. It's just going to nicely glide over them, deposit a thin layer of paint, and bringing more depth and contrast on parts. Okay, so that is looking nicely dry brushed. Get it into focus. There we go. It's highlighted all the parts. Now some of the parts do look rather grey, but as I said, don't worry, because we've got one more trick up our sleeve, and we're taking this from our friends in the wargaming hobby. Got this Citadel Nuln oil. If I'm pronouncing it right, I don't know. So I'll just clean this brush. Right, so this shows a flat brush. So that is a Master Tools F08 brush. Give this a good shake, and what we're going to do is just, not overly, but a generous coating over the parts. Try not let it pool at the bottom too much, and this will tone back the dry brushing, and it will flow into all the recesses, imparting shadow. And because it's this sort of greasy, grimy colour, it'll just add a little bit of realism to what we're working with, because ultimately these parts would have an accumulation of, you know, greasy, oily film on them due to the nature of them. So you don't need an awful lot of this. It goes a fair way. It's quite thin, but it just tones back that dry brushing. It just helps bring some depth back to the model. If you wanted to, you thought you'd gone too far with the dry brushing, you could always come back in with the matte black paint and touch in areas you think are too bright. As I said, I'm happy enough with it. So you want to get this even on, let it flow, try not to let it pool in any parts. It doesn't take too long to dry. Doesn't matter if you've made a bit of flicks or anything around here, because that all adds to the realism. You notice there's a few spots and flicks and stuff like that, but that's just a bit of weather in it. And this stuff dries reasonably matte, slight sheen to it. Again, that just makes it look a little oily. So I think we've gotten pretty much everywhere that needs to be gotten. So we'll let this dry, and then we'll come back, and I think we'll be thinking about getting the fuselage closed together. So we'll see you in a moment. So whilst we're waiting for the parts to dry, we'll have a quick look at the instructions. So we've also got two fuselage halves coming together, and it would appear that we need to put this piece here in prior to closing up the fuselage halves, and I'd imagine there'll be one each side, so we need to have a look at the parts for that. Looking on here, then we've obviously got the cockpit glazing. Interestingly, it's showing Q29 attached to the upper glazing part when we've already been told to attach it here to the cockpit. So a little confusing, and hopefully it won't catch us out. We'll soon find out. And we've got options here for open and closed. Now I'm going to be modelling mine closed. It's pure choice. If you want to model it open, then that's entirely up to yourselves, but mine's definitely going to be closed, so we're going to be going for E21. So these parts I'm assuming will go on after we've brought it together, but we do need to look for P24 and P23. So I'm going to go and look for them. Oh, we've also got to look at the tail rotor assembly as well to see if there's anything that needs to go in before we bring it together. Obviously this is where your tail rotor gearbox is going to be. So that's N12. You've got F37, and then you've got your grill and your photo wedge part. So we need to look at N12 and F37 because I'm assuming this is the shaft for the rear tail rotor. So we need to make sure we don't need to put that on until we've brought it all together. So we're going to have a look at those parts, and then we'll come back, and hopefully by then we'll be at the point of bringing it all together. Right, so been looking at pointer. So this part here, P24, P23, so that builds together quite simply into that part there. Now, having a look at looking through the instructions just to check to see, because it's obviously just a large opening even with that in there, you get to section 20, and if you look here you've got part P25, which I've taken the time to get off, and it's here. And I think again this is possibly a minor oversight on Takom's part, but it would be easier to put this in before you put in the ducting, purely because you don't want to glue the ducting in and then have it in the wrong place, and then it'd be an absolute pain in the bottom, to put it none too politely, to get this part in, because it's quite a tricky fit. When it goes in nicely, it really does go in nicely, but to get it to go in nicely, you've got to do a bit of jiggery pokery. Just gentle persuasion. There we go. There, and it locks in, and it locks in beautifully. But having this in place then gives you a solid fixing to butt the actual ducting up to. So just check alignment, a little bit of glue, push and hold. It's going to need a little bit of cleaning up, but it shouldn't be too tricky that it's going to obliterate any detail. Just check your alignment, make sure it's perfectly aligned. And drop more glue there. This Takom plastic seems to work really, really well with the Mr. Cement S. Really likes it. So sometimes it's handy just to have something else to put precise pressure on where you need it. There we go, so that part's nicely in. Now we've got it in, drop of glue there just to seal up that opening. Beautiful detail on the rivets. And then what we can do is we can come in with this piece here as per the instructions. It'll only go one way and it just slots in. Right, I think it is. And we can put a drop of glue on there. Gentle nudge. And then we check the alignment with the part, and it's perfect. There and thereabouts, it's pretty much perfect. Always tweak it a little bit if needed, just to bring it in line with the aperture on the outside of the fuselage. Actually, I don't know if I've got that right. Let's try that again. Try it that way around. Well, it can only go one way because it's a shaped aperture. So it's just a case of getting it fitted right. And you really wouldn't be able to get this done properly unless you'd pre-fitted this part in the order I've done it, rather as the order Takom asked you to do it. And there you go. It's maybe not just coming across on the camera. Better angle for you. There. So there's the part in. So I'll just off camera get that squared up. There we go. Right, so there we are. That's that part all glued in, so it's nicely fitted in there, and it matches the aperture quite nicely. There's a little bit of filling and sanding going to be needed here, but realistically, when you get the engine, the cells and whatnot on, you're not actually going to see much of this. But we'll check to see if it's a panel. If it's not a panel, which I don't think it is, I'll just pop a bit of filler in there. We'll get rid of those gaps, clean up these seams, and that'll be perfect. So there's something to be mindful of, and another oversight on Takom's part. Really, the instructions are the only thing letting this kit down. The rest of it is just amazing. So I don't know if we can forgive them for the instructions, but we'll have to see. So I'm just going to go and check parts N12 and we'll come back in a minute. Right, so we've looked at N12 and F37, and looking at these parts, we can actually do that assembly once the fuselage halves are brought together. So we really are at the point now to bring these together. So I'm going to try and do this not live, well, yeah, live on camera. We'll see how we get on. Have your last look at this before we put it in, so you can see that the wash has dulled down the dry brushing significantly. We've still got highlighted detail, but the rest of it's more in keeping. But we've got a nice few oil spatters and stuff on the bottom with a bit of weathering. So it's brought a bit of life to the part, but we all know we're not actually going to see a huge amount of it. So let's get those in there. So it's a good positive fit. I'm not actually going to glue any of these joints because they're such a positive fit. I don't think we need to. We'll probably, because we can get access from underside, we can glue the cockpit from the underside. So let's get it together first, and then we can figure out how we're going to tackle this, because this is going to make or break this kit for a number of reasons. Right, so let's squeeze together. There we go, nice positive click. Right, and let's get the cockpit together. Now I'm going to get some Tamiya tape, and we're going to do some taping up of the front and the boom. So let's get the cockpit in. There we go. Nice positive click there. So I'll get some 8mm tape. There we go. Right. This is a big lump of aircraft. It really is. The 1/35th scale. You know, you're getting into big model territory. So I know I'm having fun building it, but I have no idea where I'm going to display this when it's done, but we can worry about that nearer the time. So let's tape up the tail. There we go, and that's holding itself nicely together, so that's good. Now, when we looked at the review of this, then we noticed this seam here. Now this is somewhere where we really aren't going to be able to sand at all, otherwise we're going to obliterate all this amazing rivet detail that Takom have included in this kit. So we need to be canny how we glue this. Now we've got this part here we can put a glue in to start with. Just take the bottom of the boom, and the main thing with this is that because there's a row, I don't know if you can see this, but there is actually a row of rivets on either side of the joint, which would indicate that there's possibly a joint in the metal there, like a panel joint. So if we take that up, good, right. So what we need to do is get this as level as we can. So when we run the glue down here, there's going to be no step. It's going to be a nice even circumference around the join. And we don't want any glue to or melted plastic to come out of this joint. We just want the joint to glue. So let's get it taped up. That's going to hold it a lot firmer. And we'll tape the top up as well. So just a few pieces of tape in strategic places. Just holding it together. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out which part goes in here, and we'll get that off the sprue, because I'm thinking we're going to use this as a sort of structural strength point before we finish gluing the rest of these joints. If we can get this one good, the rest of it will follow on nicely. So give me a moment, I'll find that part, and then we'll come back and start gluing. Okay, so we're back, and we have found part N6. And it just fits nicely in the bottom of the fuselage like this. That's a really good fit. So what we can do is we're going to glue in here first. And obviously, because this part of the joint isn't going to be seen, put plenty of glue in. So we want this to be a good, strong area. Now, bearing in mind, got capillary action. That's probably going to wick some way up here and down here. So we need to make sure either side of this joint is aligned properly. So use your Mark 1 eyeball and look down the joint, see that both fuselage halves are level, there's no step. Go from both sides. Right. And when we're happy with it, I'll put another bit of tape on it. So that's nicely glued in there. Now what we can do is we can, if we're happy with how it's level here, so we can actually run some glue in on the top side, let it wick down the way, and that way we're not having to put any glue on the outside and risk losing any of the details. So just where I've got a bit more room behind the camera, just touch and flow. So just touch the flow whilst holding the fuselage in the vertical position. Let the glue run down the join, and then we just want to make sure we give it a gentle push together, and just a gentle push. Let the glue dissolve the plastics and get a good strong bond. Just remember, we're not planning to do any sanding on the undersides of this fuselage, so now is really, really important that we take our time and glue this so that we don't have to destroy any of the detail by cleaning up a bad glued joint. Right. Now if we're satisfied that we've got enough bite on this part here, we can take a bit of tape off. We'll just move the tape along a bit. We'll tape up this part of the joint. There. We can get this part here. I've just noticed on it before we put it in, it's just a very fine mold seam there. Sand and sponge. Just a few swipes. You don't have to press down very hard. Don't want to lose any of the detail. You can always cover it with your thumb if you want, so the sponge doesn't ruin any of it. There we go. And it has gone. Lovely. So, now what we can do, and this is really going to strengthen up the bottom of the fuselage, is place that part in. You can hold it in place with a thumb, like this. And then we can get some glue, and we can wick the glue around the base of this part. And I know this part's called to be put in a lot later in the instructions. However, this is going to help reinforce the lower side of the fuselage joint and make the construction very, very solid before we move on to glue up the rest of the fuselage. So you want to give it a gentle push, but just a gentle push, because you don't want to get any glue squeezing out that's going to destroy the detail. This is all about preserving the detail of this kit, and it is beautiful detail. So to be fair, the plastic does seem to go off quite quickly with this glue. Mr. Cement S, Takom's plastic really does like it. If you need to, run another bead in, just so we know it's fully glued in place. Little nudge. Right, and then we can get on and get some more tape on it, and then move away from that part of the fuselage. Piece of tape here. Hold it with your thumb, a little bit of pressure, pull it, get taut, and then back down there like that. Okay, and then we'll get a piece over here. around about here, hold it with your thumb, a little bit of pressure to pull on it, get some tension, and it breaks. There we go. There we go. So that's just going to hold that part in place whilst the glue sets up. It's not going to take long. And then we're going to work our way along here. It's actually a really good join just the way it is. I think I might just, seems we're here, strike whilst the iron's hot. I'm going to run this glue in this join now. Don't go too close to the tape. We do not want the glue to wick under the tape, because that will destroy all the detail that we're working so hard to preserve. So gentle push together, and it is just push and hold here. We don't want to squeeze any plastic out of the joint. Sometimes you just have to hold it. If you've got it in that sweet spot where it's looking good, just crack on and do it. And the last piece of glue is going to be the tail. So once the glue's flashed off on the outside of the fuselage skins, the risk of causing damage by wicking has gone. I can get a piece of tape and tape it up. So last but not least, for this bottom part of the fuselage, we want to put glue in the joints at the end here, and we can put plenty in here because there's very little risk of us causing any damage. What we can also do is run glue in the tail section there. Then we can get a close peg. I use these ones with the silicone, there we go, the silicone inserts so it doesn't mark the plastic. And we peg that joint together, making sure that we're happy with the orientation of the part. Also making sure we're not squeezing any glue out of that joint whatsoever. There we go. And when we're happy, let that set up. And then we'll get another peg on the base of this tail. This is obviously glue wicked up there, so that joins together properly. Right, now the other place we can glue whilst we're waiting will be the nose section, right on the nose here. Oh, the length of this is huge. There we go. So we're going to glue this section of the nose together. We're not going to glue this at all. We're just going to merely glue the front section together, and then we're going to leave it dry completely. And then when we finish it secured on the bottom, we'll then do the same process on the top, where we glue small sections until we've gone around each part in turn and it's all glued together. Then we're going to look at putting the inserts in that's required and moving on to the next stage. So we'll leave this video at this section, and when we come back we'll have the fuselage glued together and we'll be moving on through the build. So thanks for watching. As always, if you've got any questions, pop them below. Always read them over and answer them. And if you like what you see, consider liking and subscribing. So till next time, guys, happy modeling. Take care.